You've been thinking about launching a podcast, and it's a great way to promote your business. But where do you start? You have so many questions. What equipment do you need? How long should an episode be? How do you get listed on Spotify? About Basingstoke is the answer. We're professional audio producers with decades of experience. We can advise you on your podcasting strategy, record your episodes, or show you how to do it yourself, get you listed on all the major platforms, and help you understand audience building and ways to turn listeners into leads. Find out more at aboutbasingstoke.com/podcasts. Oh, and if you think you have to do video because who listens to audio these days? Well, you're listening to this, aren't you? Get professional podcast advice and production. Visit aboutbasingstoke.com/podcasts.
About Basingstoke.
We're brought to you with support from IncuHive, with a new location now open at Brunel House, Stevenson Road in Basingstoke. If you're looking for a new home for your business, check out incuhive.co.uk.
My name's Johnny, and I'm a foster carer for Hampshire County Council.
Well, Johnny, welcome. How long have you been a foster carer?
I've been fostering with my wife since about 2006. So initially we started with an independent fostering agency, and then transferred over to Hampshire County Council, and that's our backstory.
Well, you say it's your backstory. That's a part of your backstory. I'm really interested to hear about what it was that led you to, and your wife as well, to become foster carers.
We had our own children, so we had 3 children of our own. I started to become a youth worker, which then I found inspiring, working with young people. And then obviously for me, the next level was actually to welcome young people into my home, with the support of my wife, who also works within education with children. And then we sort of initially done it as almost like testing the ground, and then just found it so rewarding and so inspiring that we've carried on ever since.
It's one of those thank goodness things. You know, people say, thank goodness there are people like you, Johnny, because there are kids who, through no fault of their own, are in terrible situations. They need somebody to do what you do. But I suppose the other side of that coin is that is often the thing that puts some people off. You know, they think these kids are coming from difficult backgrounds, they're in terrible situations. Am I going to be able to deal with their particular needs? Was that something you were concerned about?
Absolutely. I mean, some of the, when you get a piece of paper, a referral or whatever, and it's just a piece of paper that lists, risks and behaviours and what have you, sometimes that can be really challenging and can really be a bit off-putting. Actually, when you meet these young people and you start to sort of engage with them, you see a totally different thing than this bit of paper. There are going to be very extremely challenging moments, but the level of support we get within the fostering service really helps us through those tough times, especially now that they've kind of introduced the hives, which gives that extra layer of support by people that actually have that lived experience. So they've got that lived experience with you, so they can actually genuinely empathise on that same level. Social workers are brilliant for obviously the level of support that they provide, but again, and this is not a knock, but it is a different level of support, if that makes sense. As when your peers that have actually lived that and know what that day-to-day experience can be, it really does help you through it. And sometimes it can be that actually when you're having those challenging moments, you think, oh, on my word, why am I doing this? And it can be a fellow foster carer that actually then sort of reminds you of actually some of the good times that you have. And like anything, in any job or vocation that you do, there's always going to be an element of challenges. But that is only sort of, I would say, 5% of the time. But sometimes when you're caught up in that moment, that's the only bit you focus on. And sometimes just having someone that enables you to sort of redirect your focus on some of the massive achievements that you've made or the massive milestones you see these young people come through all this adversity, it so makes it worthwhile.
Yeah, and I suppose those of us who are parents know that it can be challenging being a parent anyway. The difference, I suppose, with this is that, as parents, sometimes we try and manage difficult situations ourselves, or we maybe reach out to friends and family. As a foster carer, you've got this support network of professionals that you can reach out to and you can ask them for help.
Absolutely. And like you say, there are professionals that you will work within a team. In some cases, that team can be quite extensive. You could be working with CAMS, the Child and Adolescent Mental Health Service. You could be working with school teachers, obviously with social workers, amongst others, including counsellors, etc. However, the biggest part for me is actually working with other foster carers. Because like you say, I've brought up 3 children of my own. And there were some very tough moments with my own 3 children, my birth children. However, it is different when you do foster care. There is a difference. You don't get the level of support that you get as a foster carer, for one, as a parent. But for 2, there's a different kind of training we get. So we get therapeutic training that enables us to, manage children's behaviour from a therapeutic point of view. Because hopefully, our own birth children would have experienced a level of trauma of some degree. However, the trauma that these young people that come into care experience is totally different. I mean, they don't have the resilience in some cases of their parents or whatever, where you need to be that resilience. And it's very, very difficult for them to just accept that. So sometimes some of our work involves just trying to build that trust, that they actually start to form those meaningful, trusting relationships with you as a kind of caregiver.
Yeah, and this is probably a how long is a piece of string type question, but how long typically, if there is a typical length, do the foster children stay with you?
I mean, we generally really try to keep our young people until they're 18. We've done 2 stay put. So there's stay put means that they're at 18, they become care leavers. However, Hampshire County Council will kind of support you if you wanted to go beyond that, and that's when they call it stay put. So Della and myself have done two stay put where they've stayed with us until they've gone off to uni. One's still very much in touch with us, that's currently at Bath University studying music. So she'll come back now and again to see us, or if she ever needed somewhere to stay, we welcome that. And the other one stayed with us and kind of studied, if you like, from home, but they done their A-levels and enabled them to do that. So back in the day, you used to hear of children that would leave their foster carers at 18, and that was blanket. Now there's very much, we're supported to keep them on post 18 if that's right for the young person and right for the fostering family. Not all foster families are in a position where they can do that, but others are, and it's very much embraced if you want, and it's right for that young person to do that.
And are there short-term foster carers as well who would maybe take a child in, just for a few weeks or a couple of months, for example?
Yeah, so we have emergency foster carers, and there's a big need for that, where they can be, out of hours or whatever. So it can be at midnight that a young person comes into care and they may need a bed for 2 nights, or they may need a bed for a week. And we've got carers that can do that. We also have foster carers that solely do that. So that's all they do. So they may keep that young person for a week, and then until sort of a more permanent foster placements found, and then then obviously transition to that placement. So yeah, there are a great need for that. We also have respite carers that so say a foster care, they're going away on holiday and they need that bit of family time with their birth children or whatever, and for whatever reason that they can't take that young person, their foster child, then that respite carer can provide that. And within our hives now, what's great working model in that is that we try to make it that the young people are known to the carers. So it's not just like they're shipped to some stranger. They'll have a connection of some sort with that potential for respite carer. So it's not like they just go off to a stranger that they've never met before. What we're trying to do is build that model in that there's a familiarity. They know each other. They've met each other prior to going there.
And in terms of the process, I mean, you've worked both with private agencies, but also with Hampshire County Council. And I don't know if there is a big difference in the way that it works. But supposing somebody's listening to this now, they think, yeah, this is something I have thought about. I've considered foster care. I'm going to do it. What's the first step they take?
But the first step I would be looking at is I'll be looking at phoning my local authority and making that inquiry. And that would be my baseline. Like I say, there are also independent fostering agencies, but for me, again, I'm not here to promote one or the other, but the first step for me and the process is to give Hampshire County Council a call, if that is your local authority, and just sort of explore from there. There won't be no, and the really good thing is once you make that call, it doesn't mean to say you're tied in. That can be initially just a conversation. And then what they can also do there is say, well, actually, what we can do is we can give you a phone number of another foster carer, and you can speak through that with them. And they'll also try and match it. So say, for argument's sake, I've got 2 birth children and one's 4 and one's 6. They try and match me with somebody that has similar family situation to see how that works as a foster carer, to make sure that actually that is the right thing to do.
I mean, that's brilliant. And I'll say at this point, I'll mention it again later as well, that Saturday the 16th of May at Eastleigh Leisure Centre, there's the Hampshire Fostering Live event, and you can go along, you can have that sort of initial conversation with the team from Hampshire County Council's fostering team. You can find out more about it, ask the questions you want to ask. So that's Saturday 16th of May down in Eastleigh from 10 until 1. So once you've had that sort of initial conversation, you've decided to go ahead, you've said, yep, I want to do this. What's the sort of the next step, and what sort of timeline are we looking at? Once you've said, yes, I want to be a foster carer, you mentioned training, and I imagine there's a lot of things that need to be put in place before you can actually be a foster carer.
Yes, because obviously we're dealing with some very extremely vulnerable children and often vulnerable families. So you don't necessarily foster in isolation. And what I mean by that is you don't necessarily just foster the child. You will have contact invariably sometimes with family members or whatever. So you do need to sort of be prepared for all of that. So you would go on training. There's sort of skills to foster, which is your pre-approval kind of training, really, that's getting you prepared, ready for fostering. So it gives you the complete an honest picture of what the day-to-day life looks like as a foster carer, as specific as you can be, because in anything, there's always individual cases, and it's in sort of individual situations, I guess. So that would be your initial thing. You would go on your training courses, speak with other foster carers. You'd get buddied up. So you get buddied up with an experienced foster carer, and they're great for answering the questions or anything that crops up along the way. And again, it's very individual. Some cases it can be really quick to go through. Others, it depends on, like your individual circumstances, it may take a bit longer. So it's really hard to give you a kind of a specific sort of answer on how long it takes. But sometimes it can be as little as sort of 6 months, which sounds a long time, but like I say, there's checks, the normal police checks that you'd have to do, like the DBS. There's other checks that they do in the background sort of stuff, and then there's your training. So yeah, it's a very thorough process, which I think as parent I'd want to make sure that there was a thorough process if my children were going into care. So it's kind of, for me, it felt really reassuring to that actually this process was extremely thorough, and that for me was a source of comfort as opposed to a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously you're in touch with lots of foster carers. I'm guessing there's no typical background that somebody has. It can be people from all walks of life in all different situations who choose to do this.
Absolutely, there's no barriers whatsoever. So within the sort of hive that I'm part of and I run, we have same-sex couples, we have people from different cultures. So if anybody's interested in it, please don't. There's no obstacles that we can't overcome. Generally, there's no obstacles that come. So some of the misconceptions about you have to be married or you have to be this or you have to be in man-woman relationship, none of those are it's completely open to everything.
Yeah, I mean, that's good to hear, because ultimately it's about providing what is needed for the child. And that, as we know, can come from all kinds of different situations, different backgrounds. They may come from what would be considered a traditional family background, and and that hasn't been great for them up until this point. So as long as they're, I guess, in a situation which feels stable, which feels safe, that's the most important thing.
Absolutely. And if it's somebody that's going through this process, that to me tells me that's someone that really wants to make a difference to children's lives. And that is the most important, isn't it? Fundamentally, anybody that wants to provide protection and a nice, loving environment for a child, that's the qualities you want. That's the values that we look for in people. It doesn't necessarily mean, we're not looking for people that have got degrees or people that have got an extensive educational thing or coming from a professional background. It's none of that, because actually, fundamentally, the values that we want is somebody that actually at heart wants the best for these children.
And Johnny, a couple of things that kind of occur to me, and it's sort of putting myself in this situation. Is it difficult when, particularly if you've been fostering a child, a young person for a number of years, they turn 18, you mentioned that some keep in touch, some choose not to, and that obviously everyone's situation is different. Do you find it difficult when they kind of leave the nest, particularly if they don't choose to keep in touch?
No, because I think it's about what's right for them. So yes, from my point of view, sometimes if I think about what's right for me, that's not necessarily what's right for the child, if that makes sense. So I always put myself in the child's point of view. So if the child wants to close that chapter, and that's like, that was my past and I don't want to revisit that, then I can respect that 100% and say, actually, that's right for them, So, I kind of hear that. There'll always be a time that you reflect. You have your personal reflection. When they've just gone. And normally it's a transition. So it's not like the here today, gone tomorrow type thing. So it's normally there's a level of preparation. So you might be preparing for them becoming 18 sort of 6 months prior to that. So you do have that level of preparation. So you will have, some celebratory meals. You'll have time to prepare most importantly that young person. But in preparing that young person, you're also preparing yourself.
Yeah. And in terms of your own children, I mean, were you fostering at the same time as your own children were at home? And if so, how did that dynamic work out?
Actually, we started to foster when my youngest was 15 years old. So my other two had obviously flown the nest, so to speak. So Ashley was my youngest. He was 15. One of the young people, I won't say names, but one of the young people that we had, she ended up doing stay put with us, as it happens. And they formed a really close relationship. They actually called each other brother and sister, but foster brother and sister, if that makes sense. And they had a really good relationship and shared friends. That won't always be the case, but my middle son also has taken young people fishing. So yeah, there are, but again, it's not always the case, because it's very much led around what the needs of that young person is, as opposed to what our needs are.
I mean, that's lovely to hear of the bond that your children have made with foster children as well. I think that's fantastic. And I think that will certainly, there are different situations. Everybody's an individual, and sometimes those bonds will happen, sometimes they won't. But that, I suppose, is one of the kind of things that makes this interesting, isn't it? Because you're dealing with individuals. You're not treating everyone the same. You're looking at what they need, providing them the situation that they need. And the rewarding bit is hopefully they go off to be in a better place than they were when they came to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things, one of my sons said is the most powerful thing he said is when we was talking about, when we've had discussions around fostering, he said one of the things that you fostering has given me the power of having a different outlook. So they see things from a different worldview, if that makes sense. And that more empathetic approach, because on black and white, you may read a media headline, oh, this young person's done that young person's done this. But when you foster, you there's always a backstory, isn't there? And we get that backstory. We get to see this young person. Not to say all young people that are in care will get into trouble, But some of the young people that we have had that have actually found themselves in a little bit of a difficult situation, we get the privilege of that backstory. We get the sort of to see that there's a reason for this. Do you know what I mean? And the reason is not always in the young person's control. They've been dealt a hand that's extremely challenging, and that adversity is extremely difficult for them to cope with.
Well, look, Johnny, it's been amazing speaking to you. We've been speaking for longer than we'd planned to, and I thank you for your time, because I think it's such a brilliant thing, and it's something which I don't think necessarily people understand fully. Hopefully, we've helped them to understand a bit more about what foster caring is, how it all works. As I say, down in Eastleigh on the 16th of May from 10 until 1 at Eastleigh Leisure Centre, people can go down and go to the Hampshire Fostering Live event and ask questions, find out lots more about the process. And I'm sure that you've inspired others to do just that and to find out more about it, Johnny. So thanks very much for being my guest.
No, thank you for speaking. And like I say, let's just hope that, people just give it a go. That's the one thing I'd say, is just explore it. If it's not right, you're not committed.
If you're organising an event in the Basingstoke area, we would love to help you get the word out. It's completely free for community groups and charities, and right now it's also free for business events too. So whether it's a networking event, or whether it's an expo, or it could be a small event in the local community centre, we want to hear from you. Just go to aboutbasingstoke.com and tell us about your event.
About Basingstoke.
You've been thinking about launching a podcast, and it's a great way to promote your business. But where do you start? You have so many questions. What equipment do you need? How long should an episode be? How do you get listed on Spotify? About Basingstoke is the answer. We're professional audio producers with decades of experience. We can advise you on your podcasting strategy, record your episodes, or show you how to do it yourself, get you listed on all the major platforms, and help you understand audience building and ways to turn listeners into leads. Find out more at aboutbasingstoke.com/podcasts. Oh, and if you think you have to do video because who listens to audio these days? Well, you're listening to this, aren't you? Get professional podcast advice and production. Visit aboutbasingstoke.com/podcasts.